Welcome, everybody, to our August 2026 Apereo Microconference. Glad you guys could be here with us here today. I'd like to welcome you to the session. I'll be moderating today. I'm Wilma Hodges. I'm the Apereo Community Coordinator, among a few other hats that I wear as a consultant in the open source space. And these are just some quick stats about our microconferences that have been seeing quite a bit of activity and success over the last few years. So we're pretty proud of the engagement that they have engendered. I'd like to thank our sponsors. JMA Consulting is our microconference sponsor. They host and support CiviCRM, which is what you used to register today. We'd also like to thank Big Blue Button. That's our platform sponsor and our virtual meeting room. Maybe you've used Big Blue Button before, but if you haven't, you get a chance to try it out. And then also we'd like to thank the Apereo community, a great group of folks that are passionate about open source, and they really make all of this happen. So if you have not already signed up for our newsletter, I do encourage you to do so. You can find the Join Apereo Communications link at the bottom of our website, www.apereo.org. And if you go to that link, you'll get to choose which items you'd like to sign up for. There's a microconference notification one, and then there's also the newsletter. So I encourage you to do that so you can stay up to date with all of our upcoming news and events. Today's session is on the future of open source in higher education, what the data tells us. So open source has been a cornerstone of higher ed technology for a long time. Drawing on longitudinal data from thousands of institutions, this session is going to explore how that role is evolving. And we're not going to be focusing on specific products. It's more of a broader ecosystem discussion and some of the market signals and the trends that are suggested. So our speaker today, who's going to take us through this, is Justin Menard. Justin's the founder and CEO of ListEdTech, a market intelligence company that tracks technology implementations across higher ed and K-12 institutions. Since founding the company in 2014, he's helped institutions, technology providers, consultants, and researchers to better understand the evolving educational technology landscape through an independent market data and analysis lens. Justin regularly presents at industry conferences on technology, adoption trends, procurement, and strategic planning. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Justin. Oh, just a quick note before I do that. We are recording the session. If you do have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat. And our speaker will either take them as we move along, or we can save them to the end. But please do stay muted throughout the session unless you raise your hand and we call on you, just so that the recording doesn't get a lot of background noise. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin.
Thank you for having me. When I was first approached about speaking to you guys, it sort of occurred to me that I know not very much about open source. When I started this company, and might as well go there, about 12 years ago, I used to work at a University of Ottawa for about 24 years. And at the time we needed data. This was the big thing. We were trying to figure out what our peers were doing, what software was out there. And this is sort of how I fell into this company. Before I founded the company, I had worked at sort of getting this data, and I was doing blog posts. And the blog posts were basically there to figure out if anybody was listening, anybody wanted to share information on data. And I had taken a sabbatical and I was writing regularly. And at one point I did a blog post on sort of the learning management systems being used out there. And this guy answered back and he was asking, where did I get my data and things like that. And at one point in the conversation, he was like, so where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from Ottawa, Canada. But we're traveling and I'm in Berlin right now. And he's like, I'm in Berlin. And I'm like, okay. And he basically said, you want to go out for a beer? those are magic words for Canadians. So yes, the answer was yes. And I went to have this beer, and we started talking about all where he was getting the info and sharing all this. And when I came back from that year off, I started the company. And my first go-to thing was to find a platform. And the platform that I used was MediaWiki. And we added sort of a semantic layer on top. And this is how the company started. And for several years, this was a platform I was using. It was the perfect go-to thing until we sort of realized that it was also the perfect platform, unless you turned it off and you made it like secure, to have all your data being scraped by other vendors. So learning curve, that's my experience with open source. As I sort of mentioned here, we're an independent market firm. We only track data that are being used at universities, colleges, and school district. That's our bread and butter. We have most of our clients are ed tech firms or consulting firms. And about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we opened it up to institutions. And this sort of has been our fastest growing market. So today's presentation is going to be based on about 20,000 higher ed institutions worldwide. We will only look at 35 product categories. I'll show you which ones we're looking at. We don't look, or we're unable to track sort of like databases if they're using open source or not, and we can't track if they're using specific operating systems like Linux. That's also things that we don't track. So it's software like that's being used by institutions from research to student information systems. So it's front end products. And off of these, we have 86 that are tagged as open source, and that's the data that I'm going to show you. So this is what we're going to try to answer. Are these solutions gaining market share? Are they losing ground? Is the whole market transforming? So before we get into the actual data, I think we all know that the market has been changing. There's pressure coming from different sources. AI is definitely the biggest one. I haven't talked about AI in almost 3 minutes, so I guess we need to do it now. There is a lot of pressure on the market, and open models are definitely something that everybody's talking about, especially institutions. We'll get more into that later on. The SaaS model, which is really about the interface. You purchase a product, you're not looking at the back end, you're really looking at the interface and how well it works. So that's an impact for anybody in open source. Cloud, really beneficial to open source products. Very often it's the commercial arm that makes it work. Budgets, university budgets are always an issue, and I think it's getting worse for everybody else. So definitely something to look out for. Security, for years, this was an advantage, I think, for open source products. You could actually see the code, get in there. This is changing because of AI and vendor consolidation. Enterprise or universities, colleges, they try to sort of diminish the number of suppliers they have, also a challenge. So we're going to be looking at all of these different views, specifically at the end where it's more of an opinion based commentary that I'm going to give out. So the model. For years, or at least when I was younger, the model was simple. You download, you install, you modify, and you maintain. This was a typical open source project. It was easy. Everybody understood it. Now it's a lot more about the community, the infrastructure or the platform, managing services, the enterprise, the impact of AI. These are all things that are now part of what we're seeing as the open source model landscape. So even though there's 35 product groups, from an educational point of view, there's sort of 5 big product categories that we look at. We're going to look at all of them, but these are the 5 big ones. The LMS, digital repositories, identity access managements, content managements, and library systems. These are also part of the big systems. We don't see them as often in the sort of the core ERP SIS systems. There are systems out there, definitely, but they're not very much used in education. At least we're not seeing that data. So these are the 35 product groups that I sort of mentioned. Everything from alert to student information system. And you can sort of see the orange part is the open source products that we have tagged and their market share in that specific group. So if you look at the big one, the content management systems, active systems out there based on 20,000 universities, colleges in higher ed, almost 70% are using an open source product. Same thing with learning management systems. It is, they're still leading, even though there's different pockets, and we'll get into that. I just want to clarify that one of the LMS systems that the company itself sort of says it's open source, I'm talking about Instructure, is not being counted as open source here. You can look at it a different way. There's a sort of a fine line there. I'm just letting you guys know we are not counting it there. Basically, the big two ones are Sakai and Moodle, as you guys know. Okay, usage. So overall, the bottom graph here, you can sort of see that all the active products that we track, 10% are open source, the ones that are being used at higher ed institutions worldwide, 10%. I'll be honest, I wasn't sure when I looked at this data. I was like, is that a lot or is that not a lot? If you would ask a vendor and he would have 10% of the market, he would freak out. This would be massive. So it is a big chunk of the market that's using open source products. And again, were you only looking at 35 product groups, we're not looking at all the back-end products where I know open source Linux or databases are very, very much used. When I talk to my CTO and I tell him open source, because I did have a few chats with him about this, he was like, of course, it's the only way to go. And I was like, okay, I don't use these products. I'm clearly a front-end guy. He was like, it's the go-to thing. So there's different views. So I want to really clarify that we're looking at the front end. As you can sort of see, there are pockets here. Africa, Latin America, Asia, they are big users, even Europe, of open source. It's sort of the go-to all the time. Oceania and North America have, I want to say, a smaller percentage of their products. North America, very much so. There's one big issue, or not issue, note to this. North America uses many more products than maybe the rest of the world, as you guys probably know. I did a report with IDC lately, and it was about something else. It was about security. And we were looking at the data, and smaller institutions use on average, and my definition of a small institution is under 1,500 students, have on average 16 products. When you get to larger institutions, everything over 40,000 or so, you're looking at 150 products, software that they have to manage on average. So this really impacts North America. So the number gets diluted simply because of that, the sheer amount of products that they use. Same information, it's just a bit clearer here. If you look at the number of institutions, and we're looking at 19,000 here, number of institutions, we break it down by world region. A note on our definition of North America is US and Canada. Mexico is part of Latin America. The total number of institutions that they have at least, or we know they're using at least one open source product. You can sort of see the percentage. If you go back to North America, see, I clicked it there. 80% of North American institutions have at least one product that's open source. That is massive. That threw me off. I would not have said this. Of course, I'm not in the game as you guys are, but 80% was really something that I wasn't thinking. It's much more, the product, the open source world has a much bigger footprint than I was expecting. So that was a big surprise for me. If we break it down other ways, 2-year institutions, 4 years, Cégep, just as a side note, those are 2-year institutions, but in Quebec, and they use a lot of open source. As you can see, a lot of their products are based off open source products. They just rebrand them and do a few modifications there. But you can sort of see 2-year and 4-year institutions are the ones with maybe the smallest percentage of products that are open source. Again, the impact of having so many products does play a role. Private schools use a higher percentage. Again, these are very often smaller schools, not always, but on average, they are smaller schools. So the number of products plays a role here. If we look at it by enrollment size, this goes back to what I was saying before. Smaller schools have a higher percentage of their products that are open source. So it is very often a go-to, especially when we look at smaller schools. You see a core of, when you're at higher ed, the core 3 products are, you get your website up, open source usually, you get your SIS up, and you get your LMS up. These are the 3 basic top, your email, sorry, that's there are 4 there. These are usually the biggest, the top 4 products that we see coming along with it when an institution comes. K-12 is basically the same thing. They just switch out their website is the first thing because they need to communicate with their parents. So that's with the parents, the kids' parents. So that's usually the first one that we see. Another thing that the data was showing us is the average age of products that are active for an institution. So I'll take the first one there, Africa. If you look at the open source products that they have that are active, the average age is 10 years versus the proprietary systems that are 8.6. As you can see all the way down, the open source products, they seem to keep them longer and they've been active for longer. So that sort of means the dedication of when they get a product, they modify it, they use it, they keep it longer. So there's something about sort of, you go to the extreme and you get a homegrown system. I'll use the example of a student information system, which I've worked on in the past. Once you customize it, you keep it longer. You're sort of locked into that. There's a positive and negative side there, but you give love to something, you keep it longer. I mentioned that the 2 biggest categories were learning management systems and content management systems. Learning management systems has been going down over the years, as you can sort of see here. This is the percentage of that product that is open source, and content management system is growing. It's sort of I think the impact, specifically when you talk about learning management systems, the impact is simply proprietary systems are really, really pushing the boundaries on this, especially in North America. If you would look at the learning, Moodle in North America has a much smaller footprint. About 10% of higher ed institutions use Moodle versus everywhere else in the world where it's around 75%. So they're fighting their way into every market. They're getting into Oceania, Europe, South America, and they're selling their products, the Blackboards, the D2Ls, and the Instructures. But when it comes to content management systems, there is a lot of products out there that they're really trying to fight the market. but they're not winning in the same way. The open source products, I think, I'm not sure if they're more mature or what it is, but they're clearly not winning in the same way. We're going to look at a few products, the biggest ones in our database that are open source. Moodle, as you can sort of see overall on the left side, I don't know if you see my cursor here, but their market share is going down. It's interesting because on the other side, the number of users, this is students, is staying relatively flat. So that means the customers of the products are not necessarily going away. There's just more institutions coming on board. And, oh, I went too fast there. WordPress is another one. This one is also losing market share, but the total number of institutions seems to be growing. And it's, as you can sort of see here, smaller institutions really jump on board to this product compared to larger ones. So there's a selection there that's happening. Drupal, sort of the reverse. It's going down when it comes to market share, fairly flat. There was a bump here, but it's being used by larger schools versus smaller ones. You can sort of see that there. DSpace, another product that's used at many institutions, specifically in North America. Market share, again, staying fairly flat. Not really evolving. The market share sort of had a dip there, but it's coming back up. But overall, and it's being used by all enrollment sizes. Sibolit, and I apologize, I am unable to pronounce that name properly. It's the French Canadian in me. That product is clearly being used by larger schools that need a product that is very customizable and their specific needs. So they need something they can actually play with. And the library system, again, this not only is their market share going up, but the number of users is going up. So that's an interesting one because the big competitors, which own a massive part of the market, 80% of the market or so, they buy out all their competitors, but they're unable to buy out this one. And this one has been really has a nice momentum to it. So we're going to look at the data in another way, and I don't know if I can move this. Okay, good. So what you're looking at here is over a 20-year period or so. It's year per year, open source versus proprietary systems. In a given year, how many products have been implemented that are open source versus proprietary? So I'm just going to start it up. There you go. So you can see at one point around 2007, it sort of hits a top of close to 17%. And this lasts for several years. This is sort of the, I'm going to call it the golden age, is probably not the right term, of open source, where the majority of the products, not the majority, but a fair amount, almost 20% of the products that were implemented were actually open source. It went down around 2019 and it stayed down for several years, but you can see the last 2-3 years, it's going back up. I'll be honest, I was looking to see what was being implemented, what changed. There's not one answer. It seems to be all the little products, several products that are being implemented that have a little bit more momentum. And there's also the fact that institutions are trying to get rid of a lot of the products that they have. They're not implementing as much as they were in the past. That did not work. I'm just trying to switch my slide here. There you go. Same graph, but I've split it up in North America on the left and the rest of the world on the back, on the right, and it's by enrollment size. So overall, what you can see is the new implementations are fairly flat. you can see that for North America, the larger schools, it is going down. The new implementations are not happening as much as they were in the past. For the rest of the world, smaller schools, this is clearly going up. The rest is fairly flat. There is to be a small dip when you look at larger schools, which is something that you can sort of see in North America also. But there's something about the smaller schools that are really the go-to product that they go to is very often an open source product, which I'm assuming this is not something that's a big surprise. So before I get into the big trends, what this tells me is clearly open source is not dead. You guys know this. But the market is changing in the sense that the larger institutions, which very often would give resources to these projects, I'm not saying they're moving away, but they are resource challenged like everybody else. And this has an impact to the back end, which you guys are clearly seeing. So that's probably one of the big trends that's there. The other big trend is cloud. I'm reading my notes. Cloud. It clearly didn't kill open source. It actually gave it more life simply because it was a great way to monetize these products. Institutions didn't have the bandwidth to necessarily host everything on their own. So a lot of your projects would go out and say, we're going to host them on it. We're going to host them for you, manage them for you, support them for you, and all this. And there's a lot of business around it that came because of the cloud. You guys are able to sell a very convenient infrastructure. The big thing that we're seeing with the cloud is institutions are suffering because of the budget aspect of it. What I'm trying to say is, even though they have more budget that is going towards IT, most of that budget is being eaten up because of the hosting fees. And they're trying to figure out how to get around it. So it's shifting from, should we move to the cloud, to which workload should we actually be in the cloud? And that creates, I think, an opportunity for open source. Open standards. I'm going to go really fast because of this, but this I see as something that was really created because of open source. With all the systems that institutions have, this is the thing that makes it all work together. And when it comes to AI, this is what really is going to bring it even higher. So there's no big surprise here, but open standards is sort of a cornerstone of everything that's happening for all systems. AI. Here we go again. It's probably, I see it as the biggest opportunity for open source in years, but we need to be careful about what we call open. We're seeing a rapid growth of open weight models, where organization can actually download and run the model themselves. Again, not a big surprise. It comes down to security and controlling your data. So the model that is you host everything and everybody does it for you is really being questioned because of AI. So a lot of institutions want that control. They want to be able to have that closed loop that they control from A to Z, and AI is bringing it to them in a way that it's questioning a lot of their other data that's sitting on the cloud somewhere that somebody else controls. Budget pressure, again, not a big surprise, but for years, open source has been about lowering costs, or was seen about and controlling and flexibility. But as you guys know, most institutions don't necessarily see open source as equal zero amount of money. versus proprietary software where, I don't know, it's 100,000. It's more about the total cost of ownership. And I think over the years, CIOs have been asking, I know it's free up front, but what's going to be my total cost of opportunity here? And Gartner, although they see IT budgets growing, a significant portion of that growth is going towards SaaS models and security. So open source sort of opens up that door to helping institutions out. And very often SaaS is being increasingly seen as a waste because it's so easy to get the product that once you have it, you're kind of questioning if people actually use it. So the opportunity is budget pressures can make open source attractive again, but only if you can answer what does it cost to operate. It's a much more sophisticated question than does it have a license fee. Security. The old argument was quite simple. Open source is more secure because everybody can see the code. The counter argument was if everybody can see the code, they can see the vulnerabilities too. So I think it becomes more of a question of managing the product. And that becomes much more important and a better way to see open source. So if an institution builds their own code in-house and you have two programmers that are taking care of it, that's a much bigger security risk than an open source community, even though the code everybody can see. So in the age of AI, the interesting change is going from, is this software open source, to can I prove this software is secure? And I think this is going in the favor of open source again.
If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat, or you can raise your hand if you'd like to come on the microphone and ask your question out loud. Okay, I see a question from Michelle. What was the biggest surprise from the data for you personally?
This is me being brutally honest. I was surprised because very often I do presentations about learning management systems and student information systems. These are the two biggest categories that most of our clients are at. And of course, I'm very often talking to vendors and clients that are North American based. And so you sort of look at it from the SIS point of view, where the market share is almost non-existent when it comes to open source. And from an LMS point of view, you have Moodle and Sakai, whose footprint has been really shrinking over the years when it comes to North America. So this assumption came out with me when I was looking around, even though we've worked with Moodle for several years. And I knew that the open source was sort of big outside North America. But when I looked at the data as a whole, I was surprised how big it was. And when I noticed up front that we had, can't remember what it was, 85 products that we have tagged as open source, I know we're missing some. This is something that we've tagged here and there, but nobody has really asked us questions about open source over the years. They see them as one of the products they should be looking at. But as an overall view, I was surprised, like really surprised in the sense how big it was. And I think this is a secret in the sense that needs to be shared more. And I think very often institutions don't even know that they're using some of these this software. I'm thinking, like for my website, we use WordPress, and I kind of knew it was open source, but I didn't really know. It was like we subscribe through AWS. We pay monthly. Was it open source or not? I couldn't tell you. I pay a fee monthly, which is basically the hosting fee. But there's a lot of these products out there that I think people don't even know it's open source. Or 80%, do you really think if you ask an institution, do they use open source products, that 80% would say, of course, we have an open source product? that surprised me.
I see a few folks typing, so I'm waiting for the next question to come through.
Oh, good.
Let's see. Michelle follows up. Our data has shown that folks in leadership don't know what they have open source in their tech stack. And yeah, that's very true. A lot of times people don't even realize.
Yeah. And as I mentioned before, when I talked to my CTO, he clearly knows, because I don't know if he's more, it's his nature to go to this type of product. But he was like, at home, he doesn't have Windows. He doesn't, clearly not a Mac. I have a Mac, and he's always, every time I tell him, I'm trying to do this, but the code doesn't work. And he's like, Mac, I hate these machines. He has Linux at home on his laptop. So clearly he's part of that, I'm going to call it minority, that uses this. And he is fully sold. I should ask him if he's part of products or whatever. So there is that pocket of people who know this inside out. I don't. So a lot of this was surprising while I was going through it. And I was looking at our list of products, like the 85 that I mentioned. The number of times I got, that's an open source product? And there was a few that were sort of flipped. I thought they were open source. They were quality products for research and things like that. And I was like, oh, we need to tag them. And then you go into the history and you go, they used to be, and then they were purchased by a company, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, so maybe this is happening more than I thought, or vice versa.
I see a few more comments coming in. A couple weren't questions, but they commented that they found the slide about years of using open source versus proprietary very interesting. And another person thought that the coming from the academic libraries, that the open source culture has been strong, but AI is complicating a lot of this, especially with shrinking budgets.
I think it's complicating everything.
Yeah, it's complicating the world.
Let's go back a few 5 years, the good old days.
So Jean Yves, if I pronounce that even close to correct, asks, how do you see the potential for open source solutions in Southeast Asia as transnational education partnerships continue to expand across the region? What advantages could open source technologies offer universities in establishing and operating offshore campuses?
My experience, I've been to Southeast Asia a few times, and I'm going to stretch out Southeast Asia to include the Philippines. So our team, our back-end team for the company, my company, is there. So that we have 15 employees over there. So I get to go there regularly. And one thing that I sort of noticed is, yes, definitely alive there. They're happy and proud to be there and to be using this. But they're also the target of these big companies. If I'll go back to LMS market, because it's something I know a bit more of, D2L, a Canadian company, is really targeting them there. They're able to flip some of these institutions. Same thing, Blackboard is targeting them there. They had a foothold before. Instructors, the same. So I think everybody's a target of these products. I think one of the big advantages, which is not in a way, is a lot of these countries don't have the big budgets that, let's say, North American institutions do have, even though the budgets are constrained. So they go in and they're not selling it as a typical LMS. They sell it as if it was a K-12 school. So almost half the price. And that's the only way they can get a foothold in there. So these proprietary companies are being very creative, because most of them are, as you guys know, owned by big firms that they're basically looking at revenue and increasing revenue, and have to be very creative in the way they do it. So I think all these countries are going to become targets, and I think if they can sell a product, especially a SaaS product, where you just turn it on and you have nothing else to do, if it's able to cover the hosting cost and basically a bit more to make a profit, that's all they want. So there's different models really evolving all over the world, because they need to. It's the only way they have is to grow. So I'm not sure how you fight that. Clearly, from an open source point of view, you can sort of say our product is as solid as anything out there. I think one of the big things I see that's sort of a downfall very often for open source is when you see an RFP going out, which is something that's happening less and less because of all these co-ops, product co-ops, or whatever you want to call them. There's nobody answering these RFPs from an open source. There are some companies that do try to put it in, but it's not as aggressive as these other companies. So that's clearly a downfall there. But I don't know about these co-ops, because very often they negotiate. My definition of a co-op is there's one called New Jersey Edge. Yeah, I think that's the name. And basically what they do, for those who don't know, they go out, they do an RFP, they ask all the vendors to bid, and they select, I don't know, 2-3 products for a product category. They pre-negotiate it. So an institution who's a member of this association, this co-op, doesn't need to go out and do an RFP. They can just, if they're members, there's an RFP that's already been done, they can just select that contract, that product, and leave with it. So I think very often that's a missed opportunity for open source, because I've seen very few open source products in these co-op style associations. Sorry for rambling there. It's in my nature.
No, and I share your frustration with the lack of response from open source for those RFPs, because being on the vendor side of that, it's difficult to answer some of those questions when it's an open source project versus a company. So you really have to get the commercial affiliates that are providing the hosting to respond. And that's not always as reliable, especially depending on the size of the vendor ecosystem. So.
Agree. And they're fighting, because you're assuming that at one point a big company will have more resources because they're selling their product yearly for, and I'm inventing this, $50,000 a year, versus the open source, who that vendor is probably only going to sell this for a fraction of the price because there's no licensing fee, and they're only going to be making $10,000 a year. So are they going to be putting resources towards this, even though the product is very often like, I did a presentation at an LMS vendor this summer, and they were asking me to compare product A versus product B. And at the end of the day, these products, mature products, are like buying a car today. It's the base of when you go out to buy a car is basically the same. My wife and I purchased a car, let's say 5 years ago. I am not a car guy at all. My wife is not either. And my 2 criteria for the car is enough headroom, and I wanted my iPhone to be able to connect to the radio. We had a crappy car before, so let's just put that. My wife wanted heated seats. We're Canadian. These were the criteria. And I remember going to, I emailed one, but I went to 2 dealerships with my list in my hand, and they looked at me as, of course they did, like an idiot, because they're like, every car has this now. So the base criteria for a lot of these software are met, whatever the product is. So it becomes more of a flavor of what are your peers doing, or do you like this product, or do you prefer a BMW because of the branding type of thing. So it's a lot about that, because the base level, you compare it product to product, there's not that much difference anymore. AI changed a lot of this, because now we have these big visions that we sort of throw out, that they're going, oh, this is where we're going. We're focusing on the teacher, or we're focusing on the learner, or we're focusing on everything, because our AI is going to be better than everybody else and connect everything, and you won't even have to do anything. So you sort of get these pictures, and they're I think it's great because you better understand the company itself. And I think that's maybe one spot where very often open source has that reasoning that says, well, we're not going to be focused on AI specifically. You can just bring your own. And again, what does that mean? Because these institutions don't have the bandwidth. They're very much letting the vendor bring their AI for them because they don't. To put it in place, you need several experts to do it.
So there's a question from a little bit earlier in the chat. I want to make sure we don't lose track of it, but there's quite a few that came in after. So real quickly, Dan asks, in your slide 24 titled 20 Years of Change, is that tracking all new implementations or only new open source implementations?
So that's looking at new implementations. That line that you're seeing, it's the same as the one that was here, but I'm only keeping the bottom one. So this is only open source. So you can sort of see smaller schools, 60%. That's a lot. And larger schools where it comes down to around 10%. So it is that line represents open source only.
Great, thank you. And Annie asks, are you using Built With to track usage? Also, she'd love to connect with you separately about OpenEdX, which has a significant footprint and is an omission here, and potentially Open Campus out of Germany.
We do. I have it somewhere because OpenEdX is actually included in our. I can't remember if we included in MOOCs or I think it might be MOOCs or in the learning. We have some of it, and we do not use OpenEdX. We do our own, and we have a secret sauce. It's non-AI. When I started the company, I thought I could scrape the web, get all the information out, and be fully automated. I think a year in, we sort of saw our data was crap. Literally crap. There was so much stuff that didn't work. So our secret sauce is these 12 employees or so that actually go through the data. We've tried over the last few years bringing AI into it. Same issue happens. So when a student is on Twitter and says, I hate Blackboard, we pick that up. That's a great sign. But we need two more. So we need something like the form on the IT website that says, if you want access to Blackboard, fill this out. And a professor's syllabus that says all our course will be set on Blackboard. When we have that, we know that institution is using Blackboard. And we validate it every year after to make sure they're still using it. That's our secret sauce. It's actually manual work. So our data quality is over 97%. It's not perfect. It'll never be perfect, but that's how we get our data. And we're able to cover 80% of a product's implementation in higher ed or K-12. There's 20% that either we can't pick up because it's behind a firewall, or it's simply they changed the name so drastically that we can't see it in the code when you load the page or something like that. So that's a 20% we're missing. And we do testing of our data about, I think it's 4,000 data points per month to make sure we keep it over 95. That was our goal. And lately, we've gotten so many institutions using our portal. By the way, you can just log in. There's a free version. If you're a member of an association, you get another higher level. But we have over 800 institutions using our portal. I'm just trying to get to the last page here. And there you go. This is the address, portal@listedtech.com. Those 800 institutions, when you log into the portal and you click your institution, you see all the tech stack that we have for you. And that has improved our data by maybe a 2%, where institution will say, oh, this was not implemented in 2025, it was actually 26. We purchased it in 2025. So that data gets just a little bit better, and that's been helping us out in the last year.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see. Matt notes that the RFP response challenge is important. It's often a missed opportunity. So that's not really a question, but more of a comment.
Yeah, I'm wondering
And
if you guys could do it through these co-ops. That might be instead of answering 100 RFPs per institutions, you go
mhm,
through these 4 or 5 co-ops that's all over North America, and just do answer one, and you'd be included.
yeah, that would certainly lower the burden
Yeah.
of the individual RFPs.
Again, I know nothing about this. It's just an idea. There's probably somebody out there that's going, that's impossible, or you're an idiot, but that's okay.
Let's see. There's a question about do you see potential for Chinese software solutions to gain traction in Southeast Asia? It seems that ClassIn, for example, is currently trying to expand into the Vietnamese market.
You're probably yes. The answer is yes. It's like Chinese cars. Whether you want it or not, they're coming. You can try to fight them. You can block them. But at the end of the day, they're at a lower cost. The quality is as good, if not better. Um, I don't think we're going to win that game. Not anytime soon, anyways. I know Chinese cars are actually coming to Canada. It's There's positive and negatives in there. I was actually in Mexico City, and we took a Uber, and it was a Chinese electric car that picked us up. I'll be honest, that was the most comfortable ride I've had in a while. My wife does not like electrical cars. When she's in a Tesla, the magnetic field or something like that affects her. She always gets headache. But in this car, there was nothing. So that's a losing battle, I think. It's sort of like AI and these big models, and you can try to block the smaller open, I'm going to call them open models. At the end of the day, these small models are not going to stop. And I think the larger models, there's their use, but the majority of the people are going to be using these smaller models.
Okay. Well, since I don't see any more questions coming through, I will just take this moment to thank Justin for a very engaging presentation. It was great to see some of that data, especially broken out, sliced a few different ways into region and higher ed versus K-12, that sort of thing. So I think that's all really useful data, and hopefully having more knowledge about those trends will help us to better react to and perhaps direct some of the budgetary decisions, the purchasing decisions towards open source, hopefully. So do you have any other thoughts you'd like to share? Just any closing thoughts?
No, I'm just happy to you guys reached out. It was I think EDUCAUSE last year, so I'm really happy that to get this chance. And as I mentioned, I'm clearly going to do a blog post on open source because it's not dead as I might have assumed. And it's really much alive and vibrant. And so I'm going to be doing a blog post explaining this.
Excellent. Well, we'll definitely look for that post. We do have some folks asking if you can share the slide deck.
Yeah.
We will have the recording up, as Michelle notes. That will be up on our YouTube channel in a couple weeks. But if you do have the slides to share, if you could put them in the chat or let us know that you'd like a copy, and we can email you the slides.
Sure. I will send it to you, and you can share it to those who want it.
Okay, great. Excellent. Well, thank you once again, and thank you everyone who attended today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Or a great one.